If you are one of the lucky ones, you have one or more parents who are still living their best lives, able to remain independent, active, and care for themselves. Or maybe you're like many of us, who are starting to worry about our parents' safety and health due to some unsettling incidents, like your mom having a fall or recent conversations with your dad that aren't quite right. Or maybe you're like me and you have a parent who's been diagnosed with a degenerative disease like Parkinson's or dementia. I start going down that rabbit hole of what ifs. What if my mom can no longer be living independently? What if my dad can no longer be her primary caretaker? And what about their mental and emotional health? How can I be supportive as a daughter and help when I live in Denver and they live in Chicago? Today's expert is going to give us answers to all of these questions and more. She's going to give us valuable tips on how we can provide the best care for our aging loved ones. I'm Betty Wang. I'm host of Betty's Smart Friends. I'm a certified financial planner who helps women be more empowered and feel less alone in their financial lives. Joining us today is Jenny Reynolds. Jenny is an aging life care specialist and founder of Graceful Guidance Care Management. Jenny helps families navigate the complexities of elder care. She's known for her compassionate and comprehensive approach. I'm so excited for her to share her knowledge and experience with us. Please welcome Jenny Reynolds to the podcast.
Oh,
Yay.
thank you, Betty. I'm so happy to be here to talk with you today.
Yeah, I've actually had friends who are like, could you please get an elder care manager on the podcast, because it's stuff that we're starting to all think about, but we know nothing about. I guess maybe can we learn a little bit about you and how you found this line of work? It's obviously very important and very timely and is needed.
Yeah, of
But what drew
course.
you to it?
Yeah, for me, I'm a clinical social worker by training, and I figured out during my master's program that I wanted to work with older adults and that I really felt at home in the geriatric population, because I did an internship with older adults in independent and assisted living. And what kind of drew me to work in this field was that when I was a kid, my grandfather had Parkinson's disease, and my parents were his primary caretakers because they were the only adult children that lived locally in Madison, Wisconsin. And I also had a grandmother with physical disability who was pretty stubborn and hard to help. Let's say.
She's good Wisconsin stock. I know
That's
them
right.
well. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I watched my parents kind of navigate this maze of figuring out what services to help my grandfather, how to advocate for him, how to let my grandmother receive help for him in the process, and kind of watching him either succeed or fail, whether at home or in a senior living setting. And I saw that it was really stressful on my parents and hard, and they didn't always know how to handle things or what to do with the caregiver, who they were probably overstressing by my grandfather's care. And and so I knew that like they needed some more support and more help. And I feel like they did a really good job in trying to honor my grandfather's wishes and my grandmother's ability to, make her own choices. But but it was challenging, and I knew they could use somebody that was like me, a social worker trained in the geriatric population, to really know what are the options, what are the resources, and how can we get Grandpa David the support that he needs. And so that's kind of what drew me into this field, and I love working with families and their older adult loved ones to do that.
Yeah, we're lucky for people like you to help guide us, because it's not a calling for many people. So bless
Yes.
you for on behalf of me, somebody like me that's not something I could do.
We
What
all have our
advice?
strengths, you know?
Yes, yes, that is. I have definitely noticed the weakness there for myself. What advice do you have for families who are starting to navigate this, or maybe someone like where I'm at, where it's like, okay, we can kind of see that something's coming,
Hmm.
and it may happen more suddenly than we think, right? you could probably speak to that more. It's not something like, oh, well, we have years. It could happen any day, right?
Right, right. Yeah, so some of the things that I really recommend for families is that when it comes to sort of the research of knowing what are the options of services and supports in the area where your loved ones live, don't put that on your older adult loved ones because they have enough to deal with. So if you have a parent that's dealing with a progressive disease, like Alzheimer's disease, and their spouse is caring for them, they have a lot on their plates, even in the early stages. And so I put it on families to put it up to you to do some of the research to educate yourself about home care agencies, which provide caregivers in the home in the area, or foot care nurses that do mobile foot care, or transportation options. So if your parents are no longer able to drive or get to that point, how do they get to their doctor appointments? How do they get to their social outings? As well as senior living community options in the area. So you do your own research. So you have a little bit of information when the time comes that you're not scrambling. And also knowing like who is their primary care doctor and what's the name of the hospital that they would go to if they had an emergency. And I always recommend getting a release of information on file with that clinic and that hospital so that you can talk to the staff when there is an emergency, because that's really helpful when the time comes. That's one piece. Another piece is the conversations with our aging loved ones, which are not always
Yeah.
easy.
It's
So
awkward,
it
right?
is. It
You're
is. It's
used. These are
hard.
your mom and dad.
Right. You
they're
have to
the,
know.
yeah, they're the adults, right?
They are. And they don't come to their kids or their nieces and nephews for
Right.
advice on finances or anything. You know,
Yep.
they want to be the one giving advice. And so that's why they don't want to listen to us. And that's why, you have to come at these conversations sort of a little bit at a time. So I suggest just to bring it up. Mom, I'm a little bit worried about things related to what's going on with dad. And I wanted to know, what are your thoughts about this? Or, I'm coming from the place where I care about you so much, and I want you to have the best quality of life at this stage of your life. And so I want to ask you some questions. Are you open to having a conversation with me about this? And sometimes people might be, and sometimes they might not be, but it's important to try and open the door. And if you're not successful and they shut the door on you, that you come back to it in a couple weeks or a couple months and bring it up again, maybe in a different way, maybe on a certain topic, maybe if they've just had a medical crisis, because that's sometimes an open door to talk more openly about these hard topics that most people want to ignore until they hit that crisis. So giving yourself grace and giving your loved ones grace in that process, I think is really important.
Do you recommend having someone like you being involved in these conversations, or are there resources for us to learn how to have these conversations?
Yeah. So I sometimes it can be really beneficial to have somebody that's like an aging life care professional there to be that third party to help talk about these things without all of the same emotional dynamics that come into play when it's family members talking about these topics. So there's a resource, Aging Life Care Association is the professional association of people that do what I do, which were often social workers, nurses, or gerontologists specializing in working with older adults. And we help families kind of navigate these issues. So the website for the National Association, where you can search for an aging life care professional in your area, you can search by zip code, and it's www.aginglifecare.org. And it's a great place to find somebody who is an aging life care specialist that might be able to help facilitate these conversations, and or could be a great support if you live far away from your aging parents, or you live close but you just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Is that sort of a gold standard for your industry? Like we have something like FINRA broker check, so they can check to look up our name, and there's I don't know, no rusts or no red marks, no black marks on the record. Is that sort of, does it act like that, or is it
Yeah.
just anyone can
So
sign up?
So it's really, I think it's the National Professional Association where in general I probably wouldn't recommend a care manager across the country unless they were with this organization. And
Okay.
they show on the listing like different levels of the professional. So if they have a master's degree and they're certified, if they're more basic, lower level professional, they have different designations on the website that help like advanced professional is the highest level of professional that they can have. And they have, regular sort of, we have requirements for continuing education and, active sort of engagement in the profession. And so I think it's really the best place to start.
And then I wanted to go back because I'd never heard of foot care services or this kind of, I don't know, carpool for elderly people. Is that what it's like? I mean, where do you even begin to look for that? Is it
Yeah.
also at that Aging Life Care Org site, or is there
No,
no?
you wouldn't look there. So, for example, for something like transportation options, so there are a lot of private companies that do transportation. And while you can use something like Uber or Lyft or GoGo Grandparent, those are places to start, and they're probably some of the cheaper options. Some people aren't comfortable with that because they don't feel technologically savvy or it's cumbersome. And so it might be great to have just a private transportation company that they can call and say, I'm going to this doctor in a week and I need a ride there. I need a ride home. It's probably going to be about an hour and a half. I'm not sure, and then they can set up the transportation ahead of time. So it's not a stress to find the right Uber button on the day of. Um,
Yeah.
and you can just Google, private transportation companies for seniors. And then you can call and ask for their rates and get that information. Another is foot care, because I think a lot of times people neglect foot care for older adults. But if you have a significant medical condition that causes swelling or diabetes, it's really important that you have good foot care. And a lot of people can't reach to their toes any longer at a certain point, or they're injured
Yeah.
and they
No, no.
can't. So, mobile foot care is basically a nurse that comes in and provides foot care. They might have a little foot treatment, but they can do it in home in a lot of metro areas. Or in smaller communities, they have foot care clinics where a nurse comes and you pay $25, whatever it may be, to get your feet cared for. And it just, saves the older adult from discomfort, as well as is a way to just take better care of their health in a small manner. But yeah, it's a great resource.
Yeah, no, I mean, I already feel like I've learned a lot. Yeah, I mean, this is already very practical. When we're talking about the emotional aspects of talking with our parents or older loved ones, when do you think, like, I think all of us try to put it off as long as possible. Is there a certain age? Some of us need, like, okay, as soon as my parents turn 75, we have to have the talk. Or, of course, if, unfortunately something medical happens, then maybe that would bring it up faster. But a lot of us are leery to even have that conversation. Is there, I guess, earlier is better, is maybe what you would say?
So when you say, can you be more specific in terms of have that conversation and what you mean by that?
When we're talking to parents about um, you possibly needing extra care,
Yeah.
I
So,
guess
okay.
yeah, yeah.
I, I get what you're
It's
saying.
kind of that, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
I think we need to think about this.
Hmm.
Um,
So
how do you
one
want to
thing,
approach that? Yeah,
yeah. So I would say, I mean, I think if your parent is 68 or 70, it's reasonable to bring up this topic. And it doesn't have to
perfect.
be
See, that's
like
helpful.
specific in this
Yeah,
moment. Like, okay, like you have Parkinson's disease, you're declining, you need to get a caregiver in the home. That's not how you should probably approach it. But
yeah,
if your parent is that age, you could say something like, what do you envision for your 70s and 80s and how you want to live? Like, do you want to live at home as long as you can, Mom? Are you thinking that you would be somebody that is likely to want to move into a senior community where there are lots of people? Or if Dad died, or if Mom died, what would you what do you picture for your future, and have you thought about that? And they may not have pictured anything yet, or they might be sort of avoiding it like most of us do.
Yeah.
But it's important that like you ask that question to start planting the seed. And so maybe then you can come back to it in 3 months and say, hey, I just want to come back to this topic. Like, what do you envision? Like, do you think you could have somebody come in and help you, and if you lived at home, that would be most ideal for you, and that your backup plan might be to be in senior living. But just talking about what their wishes are and what they envision for the future of their life. And it may be that, again, thinking about decline and physical and cognitive decline that often comes with aging, that people don't want to think about that. They would like to shove it under the rug and certainly not talk to their children about it. But you're planting a seed and starting the conversation, and that's the important part, because there will come a time, likely, that you do have to say, okay, well, things are changing, Mom. I'm really worried about your stress, and I care about you, and I want to support you in the best way possible. So can we talk about this, potential service or potential move, or what you want that to look like, in the next year of your life?
Yeah, because on the flip side, I have friends who have parents in their 80s who are very, very healthy, very, very active. And these conversations have not come up yet, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how do they approach that situation when their parents are doing fine, better than fine, probably better than healthier than all the rest of us?
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of be the black cloud on it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you're doing awesome, but age is age.
Mm-hmm. One thing, like in those kind of situations, which is great, right? If
Yeah,
your loved one is 84 and they're doing amazing, right?
yeah,
But you can bring it upon yourself and say, I worry about what if something happens to you? What if you guys are in a car accident? Or what if you had a bad fall, and I don't really know what you would want. If for some reason something very scary happened and you needed more help, or you needed help at home. And so I wanted to talk about that. And I think it's if we bring it from a place of, like, this worries me, you're taking care of me by having this conversation, by talking about this. I worry about this, and we don't want our children or our nieces and nephews or brother and sister to worry about us, right? Or worry about, we want to take care of them. And
yeah.
so to say, like, I worry about this, and so in order to help me, like, feel like I would know what to do, can we talk about this? And just see if they'll let you open the door a little bit to start the conversation.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
And we've talked about sort of the physical and bringing up, talking about the conversations. What have you been saying with emotional and mental health for the elderly community? Because we're all very isolated. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with all the technology and not living as close, what have you seen? How can we help? Should we? What are signs of that we should be on the lookout for with our loved ones?
Sure. So in general, I feel like mental health is kind of put on the back burner for older adults, because when something comes, well, two reasons. First, this is a stage of life that often is accompanied with decline, physical decline, cognitive decline, and like really hard times in your life. Like, these are, we all deal with hard times in our lives. And when someone is aging and getting to the stage of their life where their body is not cooperating, or their brain is not cooperating in the ways that it always has, it's very hard on us emotionally. And so there's that piece that's difficult, not to mention the grief and loss associated when our friends are getting ALS and dying,
Yeah.
or our friends are really declined and changing. Um, and then there's also the piece of, so if there is a medical crisis or an emergency, the focus is on the medical. So say your mom, Ginny, falls and fractures her hip. She has surgery and she goes to rehab and then comes home and is dealing with PT and physical therapy and is slowly getting better. But the focus has completely been on her medical health and on recovering that fracture. When in the background, what's going on is Ginny is no longer getting to her weekly game of bridge, and she's not going to her church anymore, and she isn't getting together with her friends because it's been too hard to go to their, monthly gatherings once a month. And so in that sense, Ginny might be feeling depressed and isolated, but the focus has been on her hip and recovery, and that's all anybody asks about. So it may be sort of overlooked. So, in terms of bringing that up, I think it's sometimes about bringing someone to the doctor and talking about what you've observed with them. So if you can go with your parent or loved one and being their advocate and saying, I've noticed these symptoms or these things going on with my mom. And so, and sometimes the doctor might say, oh, I wonder if they're dealing with some depression. And do you feel that way? And ask them more pointed questions about it. Um, and also that, there are different resources and things you can do to support them. So 3 different resources that are out there that exist are therapists or counselors, and many of who can do in-home therapy in metro areas especially. So
Wow.
that's one resource if somebody's open to that. Another resource is just including them in some social activities that they used to do or enjoy. So maybe it's a matter of figuring out transportation to get to their weekly bridge game, or maybe it's a matter of transportation and somebody there with them to go to their church, or maybe it's a matter of asking their friend, Barb, to come over for lunch once a week and bring lunch for Ginny. And it may be something small, but those small things that offer more opportunities for social connection for someone can really make a difference in their mental health. And so it's not a matter of saying, Ginny, why don't you call Barb and have her come over for lunch? Ginny's got enough to deal with. It's okay for
Yeah.
you as the daughter to say, hey, I'm going to text Barb or call Barb and say, hey, Barb, I think my mom is having a hard time at this point in her recovery. Do you think you could come over for lunch once a week and pretend I never called you or shared this, But Barb would be like, I'd love to, because I didn't know how to help. But, I wanted to help because people want to help. They care, but they don't always know what to do. And so sometimes just facilitating that type of opportunity for your loved one to have social connection can help with their mood and their mental health. And if it is really severe or it's been going on for a long time, sometimes medication can be really helpful. But that person has to be open to it, and they may or may not be. And so that's where a doctor can be a good ally for you, but also that, having more social connections and support, whatever that looks like, whether it's therapist or counselor coming in, or whether it's physical therapist coming in, or whether it's a friend coming over for lunch, that can help their mental health and their mood too.
Are there any Is there any criteria, like should we say, okay, mom needs to see somebody every other day that's, not dad? Or is that just person dependent? I don't know if there's studies that show like, okay, if a senior has something social or something on their calendar at least every other day, that's very helpful. Are there statistics like that, or it's just more, just try as much as we can to
Yeah.
get them social?
So, well, one study has talked about how the primary predictor, like a really large longitudinal study that has studied people for like the last 82 years, the primary predictor for someone's longevity is social connectedness. And so, from that standpoint, what I would suggest to families is to say, well, what was their social life like before? And it might be before this disease process started. It might be, when they were just working, or it might be prior to their fall and injury. And start there to say, okay, well, if they were getting social interaction 7 days a week, maybe we want to start trying first 2 or 3 days a week, and build up to 7. But if they were only really being social like 3 times a month, because some people are more introverted and
Right.
that's just not their personality, um, maybe it's a matter of putting in more subtle things like, okay, let's start with once or twice a month. That's something they can maybe look forward to, right? um, and then also we're going to add in some extra FaceTime calls with the kids. And so, my brother and his children are going to call on Saturdays and I'm going to call on Monday nights. And that's how we're going to add in a little bit of extra support, starting small, but trying to build up to what might be most ideal. And the same thing, like, for example, if their caregiver, so say your Ginny had a fall and her husband is her primary caregiver and now he's not getting out and going to he's not going to the gym anymore, he's not doing any of his regular things. Well, that's a problem. So then how can we give him some support so he can do some of his regular social interactions and events that support him, while Ginny has help at home during that time, or Ginny has somebody coming to visit, so he can get a little break.
This is so helpful. Thank you. And so, how do we, as the kids, right? How do we know when it's time for us to get involved, right? We know that our parents want to be independent. They don't look to us for help. They don't want our help. But like I said, some of my friends and I, clients, we've had conversations with our parents. We're like, that's not okay, right? Or I don't know if, like, maybe we should talk to a different doctor, or, just something just doesn't seem right. But we're trying to toe that line of giving them their independence and the respect as our parents, but also not quite comfortable with the level of care, or maybe your parents not taking care of themselves, right? They've just kind of given up. How do you frame those conversations, especially when you're not there, right? When you're not physically there?
Yeah. So in that sense, I usually think about it in the sense of when something changes in the system. So in the family system, it could be that you as the daughter are losing sleep at night because you're spending so much time worrying, or you are feeling really overwhelmed and stressed because you have to spend 3 hours on the phone with doctors or with your mom or whatever's going on every week. And so in that system, even if you are the adult child that lives far away from your parents, but you're trying to help them, if that caregiver is more stressed, that's a sign that some sort of more help is needed. And it's the same thing in a couple. If the spouse of the person that has some sort of significant disease process going on is more stressed. So maybe you notice they're not sleeping very well because they have to get up in the middle of the night and give their spouse pain medication. Or maybe they just, whenever they talk to you about it, they sound a little exasperated, or like it's getting harder. Things are changing with your loved one and it's getting harder for them. Things like weight loss can be a sign that it's really time to get more help. So maybe they're not able to make meals as well, or they're not getting decent nutrition to sort of maintain their weight. And also, I think when someone is needing help with physical daily care tasks, things like getting dressed or going to the bathroom or taking a shower, when someone starts to need help with those tasks, I think it is time to start talking about how can we support their caregivers, or how can we bring in help to help them. And I know that it's this can be a really long process for families. This can be 5 years before this has to happen, or it could be, a month, right? But I do think that Another piece that we have to be really aware of is that when our loved one is cognitively able to make their own decisions, they don't have significant memory loss, they don't have a disease that is causing dementia symptoms, then we also have to respect their level of risk that they're taking in their life to a degree. So, for example, it might be that you think dad needs like three different things of help. Like, Dad, why aren't you doing physical therapy? And why aren't you getting help with putting on your support stockings? And why aren't you, getting letting this mobile foot care nurse come and care for your feet, right? Like,
Yeah,
so you're
sounds
getting
amazing to
frustrated.
me,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess if my kid told me that I needed that, I'd be like, no, no.
Yeah. So say you're frustrated with your dad, he won't do any of these things that you're saying, oh, that's a really good idea to do. And I know of these great resources because I looked them up. Uh, but your dad can make his own independent, cognitively able to make his own decisions. Then it may be that he would rather deal with the risk of not doing these things, which may affect his health in the long term or may not, and have his independence and hold on to that for longer. So it won't be forever, and but at a certain point we have to respect our loved one's ability to make those choices. That I would rather have greater risk in my life of getting seriously injured than I would to getting extra help in,
Yeah.
and then as a daughter or as a caregiver, you bring it up in again in 3 or 4 months because it's not something that goes away. The need doesn't go away, most likely. Sometimes it does, but then you know that, okay, we're going to circle back in May or whenever the next visit is, or whenever there's an opening, that this is a conversation we're going to come back to. And knowing that you're not a failure if you don't get your parents to convince them they need, this help and they're going to accept it now. But that you're a caring, loving child or niece or nephew or sibling, and that you're doing your best to support them, and you're also honoring their independence too. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's such a delicate line.
it is
um,
very
there's no
delicate.
right answer. So let's say that the elderly loved one says, okay, I think I do need a little more help in the home. I mean, how do you even go about finding help for that? I mean, the internet sounds super scary when you're thinking about somebody who's coming in and dressing your mom or helping your dad go to the toilet, right? It's a very personal business. Like, are you doing massive background checks, or what are some resources for us to look at or to start with? I mean, or do we just go directly to someone like you who knows the lay of the land? I mean, for those of, again, we're kind of just lost and only know what we've seen on TV, which is elder abuse. And, we hear all these terrible things. And to
Yeah.
put your parents in the hands of, somebody who's less than savory is just a scary idea.
So I generally recommend that you go with a licensed and insured home care agency. It might be home health, depending on the need, but that is what you would look up in searching for an agency. Of course, kind of like gold standard would be if there's an aging life care professional in the area, I would call them and just pick their brain. Like, we're generally always willing to give out resources and say,
Yeah.
hey, this is going on. I just need a referral for a home care agency. This is what's going on with my parents. This is what I think they need. Is there an agency you recommend and why? And then, and I think that's kind of gold standard, right? But if you don't have that access to that person, then it would be sort of like using the internet or calling their primary care doctor and saying, hey, do you have a recommendation for a home care agency in the area? Because I want to, get a good one. And then I actually have a list of questions that you can ask when you're interviewing a home health or home care agency. And I'd be glad to send you that, Betty, so you can post that with the the podcast link.
That would be great. Thank you. I
Yeah,
think
but
listeners that'd be really helpful.
yeah, but sometimes knowing a couple things like that when you start working with an agency. What I like about an agency is if somebody's sick or they're on vacation or they get a flat tire, they will send a backup caregiver, and that's really important when your loved one really needs help, right? Um, and then another piece is that you want to make sure that it's a good fit. So knowing that the first caregiver that your dad or mom or aunt or uncle receives may not be the best fit. So it's important to give them a chance to try them out. But if their personalities clash for whatever reason, it's okay to ask the agency for a different caregiver. And that happens a lot. And sometimes just, it's important to have a good match. So you want to be diligent in knowing that it's okay to ask for that and paying attention to how is that, relationship going as they start to get to know each other.
I think that's a great point. I know friends who've said, "Oh, well, Grandpa fired the last 3 helpers, so we're really having a hard time," right? So it's,
Yeah.
I think it's good to know that it's like anything in life. It's a little bit of chemistry and clicking.
Yeah. And sometimes I think families can give an agency background information and saying, my mom is a really practical person. So she needs you to have a task list that I'll help you with, and you need to look busy. This caregiver needs to be busy all the time.
Yes.
Because nobody wants to pay somebody to just sit there, right?
Yes.
So it's
I don't know if
ask,
that's just Midwestern folk, Asian folk, but yeah, we want to get our money. Yeah, you're not here to just sit.
No, but then rather than having like your parent who's already dealing with a hip fracture or whatever, come up with this list, like you can help or their spouse can help. Come up with this list of things that this person can do, and that they know it's important that they're busy, and that the agency knows it's important to find somebody who's good at that, and skillful in that area. Or if your mom is really hard to get along with, it's important to say, this is my mom's personality. I need somebody who's really a strong-willed person and can, put up with her or maybe argue with her. Or I need somebody who's really gentle and will just listen to her and do whatever she says or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But that match is important. So the agency needs to know about your loved one and their personality, and so that they can make a good fit.
It's a little like dating, huh?
I
just have to. Sorry, I don't know if that's. Sorry.
No,
anyway,
no,
I mean a little bit.
Not a bad analogy, right?
So then, okay, so that's not normally, but I would imagine that's the next step because everybody wants to stay in their home. They want to be comfortable. What should we look out for as the caretakers or the second generation to start having conversations about assisted living or nursing home care, and what are the signs and how do we approach that?
Yeah, sure, certainly. So a couple different things. One is finances are always a really big piece of all of these decisions, right?
We've left a lot of that out, yeah.
Yeah, we have.
Talking about kind of like the ideal, and of course we all want the ideal, but care costs money.
It does. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to, like, sometimes that important piece is talking about the finances and being very open and saying, okay, so given that we are paying, so just take some numbers. Assisted living might be anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000 a month in the Denver metro area, say. So we'll take $7,000. So somebody needs to pay $7,000 to be in assisted living or stay at home and get a caregiver to help them for a certain amount of time. So when you sort of divide it out, you minus your expenses that you're paying to live in your home and say, okay, I've got about $4,500, whatever that might be, to pay for care. And so you can look at it from that financial perspective of saying, okay, if I am spending this much money in a week, and that times 52 is this much money in a year, I'm exceeding that $4,500 a month that I have. or that would put me under this threshold. And that's for a very practical person, of course,
Yeah, of
who
course.
pays
Yeah.
attention to the finances, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And also, so that's a piece in terms of when somebody, so say somebody has a caregiver, they are seeing them, 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they're needing more care. So if you're looking at upping hours and you're slowly increasing hours, increasing hours, increasing hours, I would look each time to sort of do the math and say, okay, well, what is it worth to me to keep living at home? And it's going to cost me this much more than if I were to move to a senior living community. So that's one piece to consider. But other pieces to consider are really knowing things like if somebody is really missing their medications. So say they use a medication box or a medication reminder box, and they're missing 5 doses in a week. And they take some meds that are pretty important. I mean, it's not just, supplements or some
Yeah.
vitamin or something, right?
Right.
But something that helps prevent stroke or that kind of thing. That if they're missing a lot of doses in a week, it may certainly be time for them to think about moving to an assisted living where their meds can be administered by the staff. Or if they take meds 3 or 4 times a day and they're missing doses because of their memory or because the system they have is not working,
Yeah.
even if it's a medication reminder box. That could be a sign. Other, signs that might be time to consider are if they're losing weight, they're not eating enough meals, and or maybe a caregiver's making meals for them, but they aren't getting them out of the fridge, or they're forgetting to eat, or because they're losing track of like the time of the day that it is.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when there's some degree of cognitive decline in their brain starting to go on, you just want to pay attention to some of those things, like how are they eating, how are they taking their meds, and if they're needing a lot of help with those things, it probably means their caregiver hours are going up and up, and it may be time to start looking at this and looking at what are the options for an assisted living. Um, Also, convincing your loved one to move is another thing, but again, it's not always about convincing them. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
like knowing what the options are and being on a wait list, um, or saying, okay, like we're going to readdress this in 6 months because this is getting worse, or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, we've talked about the aging parent, but what about the caregiver? So it's you know studies show that it's usually a female. It's usually the daughter or the wife, right? And that's like, what can we do to help them with caregiver burnout?
Yeah. It's a really important topic, and I think it's sort of, the primary issue is always caring for the older adult, and then the caregivers are just feeling more and more stressed, right? And can easily lead to burnout, especially if you're in the sandwich generation, you're caring for kids or, working full time,
Right.
very much so. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is being thinking that they're the Lone Ranger, that they're the only person that can take care of their loved one. They're the only person that can do all of these things that need to be done for their loved one. And so, what I suggest is a couple different things. One is that you have to start building the team. So that team can't just be you. So in my work, I always kind of talk about how we're all on team Bob, or we're all on team Betty, and how we may disagree on what they need or what kind of help they should get today, but we're all on the same team. And so if you're the lone daughter or the lone relative caring for your older loved one, it's important that you start building that team. And that team might consist of their primary care doctor, who needs to get on board with what's been going on so they can be supportive of you. That team might also be a therapist, or it might be you getting support from a coach that helps people caring for their aging parents. It might be an aging life care professional. It might be a caregiver. It might be a neighbor of your loved one who checks on them once a week or is good friends with them and can sort of be a support for you too,
Yeah.
because we can't do this alone. And like anything, it takes a village, but it's important to start building that team. And even if it's like, well, my brother lives there locally, or my brother is 3 hours away, but he's not very competent to help. But his wife is really good at this, maybe
Yeah.
it's a matter of enlisting his wife to help with something or a piece
Yeah.
of this that can be taken off of your plate. Um, so that's really important. Also, I think it can be really draining to see our loved ones sometimes when they're dealing with these things and we want to help and they're resisting our help. And then you get into this role where you're like the parent and they're like the child, and then it no longer feels like this mother-daughter or father-son relationship that you have always had, right? So what I suggest is that you decide on the frequency that you want to visit your loved one. That might be, if you live far away, it might be that you see them every 3 months or every 6 months. And that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go visit every 6 months, and I'm going to visit for a long weekend. And that helps me feel like good. And I'm going to decide on this frequency. And you stick to it for a certain amount of time until you feel like that needs to change or whatnot. Um, and then also that when you visit, that you limit the amount of time. So it could be that you could go over to your mom's apartment and help for 4 hours with different things, getting groceries, tidying up, going through her mail, whatever that may be, right? And then you don't get any time to have coffee with your mom, which is something you've
Yeah.
always enjoyed. So I always recommend to limit it and to say, okay, I'm gonna see mom once a week for 2 hours, and for an hour we're gonna spend on the mail and the groceries, or I'm gonna have King Supers deliver the groceries, or whatever that looks like, so that I can have coffee with mom this time. And for an hour we're gonna have coffee. And then when I leave, I'm going to go do something for myself, whether it's call a friend or go for a walk around the block, something small. But just to like take a minute that like I just put all this energy and love into my mom because I want to,
Right.
and I need to then take a minute for myself. Um,
It's draining. It can be very draining.
it can be. It can
That's
be. The
really good
same.
advice.
Yeah, thank you. The same thing if you're visiting from out of town. You
Yeah.
might be like, I'm going to spend 3 nights here instead of 5, and I'm going to stay in a hotel because then I can take my own space when I need to, rather than being in their spare bedroom and being with them 24/7, which may be stressful for some adult
Yeah.
children or many adult
Right.
children.
In the bedroom we grew up in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Talking for a friend.
I know.
Well, tell me a little bit about how what you like how people can engage with you and what's your role on this, because I don't think I had ever heard of a aging life care specialist. Like, how does do you we call you and say, can you just we can just offload most everything to you, or are you like, how does
Yeah.
again,
So,
asking for a friend,
sure,
but
sure.
I just like, I mean, I wouldn't even
Yeah.
know how that works, right? Like, how does
Right.
that, what is your role?
Sure. So, as an aging life care professional, my primary role is really kind of looking at like three different areas for people. So, that's like their safety, their medical and mental health well being, and their quality of life. Those are like the three areas I cover. I don't cover finances and bill paying, and my profession doesn't usually do that. Um, so if you need support, it's important that you can call an aging life care professional and say, hey, this is the help I'm needing. This is what's going on with my loved one, and I don't know what kind of help I'm needing. And so for me, like I offer ongoing services where I'll go out and do an assessment, where I meet with the older adult in the Denver metro area a couple of times, 3 or 4 times, and then I make recommendations. I talk with their support team and I make recommendations and meet with either them to discuss the recommendations or the family or both. And then I work with people ongoing where I check in on them every week and I see how is this support going? Is it going well? Is it going poorly? Do they need someone at this specialist appointment? And then I would go as a medical advocate for them if they do. Um,
Oh,
and
wow.
sort of, yeah, like making sure that their medical issues and mental health issues are being followed up on appropriately, and that if they're needing nudges to make changes in their care or to get more help, then I can be the one to nudge them, who is not their daughter and not in their
Yeah.
family, but who's that
Yeah.
third party that knows about all the resources out there and can nudge them. Um, Other things aging life care professionals do is just offer consultations. So you can do like a one-time 1 hour or 2 hour consultation and say, hey, this is what's going on with my loved one. How do I start? What do you recommend? What comes to mind? How do I find these resources in,
Right.
Chicago or in whatever, other part of the country where my loved one lives? And then that person then, I would then connect you with resources there and get you started and say, okay, based on these things, these are priorities I would suggest, to start here and then go here and then go here. Um, but yeah,
Which is
just provide
what we would need
advice.
because we have no idea, right? I think that's the
Right.
prioritization, and that you've been through this before and you know what we should be looking for and in what order. I think that's really helpful. This must
Yeah.
be a rewarding and sometimes draining job because it's a lot of heart, right?
Yeah.
How do you maintain your personal peace and balance
Yeah.
and
Sure.
taking care of yourself and your
Yeah.
family?
Definitely. It is well, and I love my work and I'm very passionate about it. So it very much fills my cup,
Yeah,
in who I am, and it's very fulfilling in that. And for me, it's so important that I don't work with more clients than I can manage. So I feel like I want to have this level of integrity with people. I want to do what I say I'm going to do and follow through and look at all these different areas of their lives that are impacted by aging and disease and decline. And so I don't work with more clients than I can physically do a good job with, so
yeah.
I set my boundaries in that sense. Um, but, of course, there are other things that, like, I had a client die last week, and that's just a part of my life, is that, and my
Yeah.
work is that I walk with clients sometimes until death. And so it's making sure that I take time to grieve and I take time to process that loss. And I'm going to have lunch with some of her support team to like honor her because she
Yeah.
doesn't have a memorial coming up. Um, so things like that, exercise and, yeah, I have two young kids, and so it's a
Oh.
busy life.
Yeah, you've got a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So,
my next question is what hobbies or interests, but I don't even know when you'd have time for that.
oh, I have at least one. I have
What do you
I go
like to
to
do? Yeah.
a hip hop dance class on Wednesday nights in Denver, and it's so much fun, and I love it, and it's yeah, really good for me. So that's one
Oh my
thing I do.
gosh. That's always been something I always think people who can dance, it's just amazing. Um, I wonder if there could be a spot in the back where I wouldn't hurt
There
anybody.
is. It's an
I'm,
inclusive class. You don't have to
I'm
get too
afraid
far
my
removed or
arms
anything.
flail, things kick the where they're not supposed to. That's really fun.
Yeah,
I love
that
imagining
and
you doing that.
watching Bluey are pretty much my hobbies with my
Yeah.
children. you know.
Yeah, yeah, I remember those
Yeah,
days. Yeah, it was a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
that. Um, is there anything else that we haven't covered today that you want to be sure to share?
Yeah. Um, I think one thing I just wanted to relate to people is that there is help out there. And that if you're a caregiver and you're feeling really stressed, or you're in the sandwich generation caring for parents and children, or adult children and very older parents, that there is help out there and you don't have to do it alone. And just, Googling aging life care professional in my area, like, is a good way to start. Um, but that you don't have to carry this whole burden by yourself, um, and you really can't if you want to maintain your level of sanity that you need to keep going in life. So
Absolutely.
that would be. just my parting words probably for people.
Oh, I think that's amazing. And how can people find you if they're in the Denver? I mean, I assume you really only work with people in our area. How can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website. It's www.jenny, Jenny, thecaremanager.com. And just fill out my contact form and to reach out with, whatever help you're needing at this time. And I also have an email list where I send out a monthly tip on caring for your aging loved ones. So it's like a tip sheet that might give you tips on how to provide great care when your loved one is in a memory care community, or how to help care for a loved one with dementia during the holiday celebrations, or something like that. And so you can also get on my email list as well, and you can send me a note just saying, please add me to your email list, or in about a
Yeah.
month I'll have a button that says, click on this to get on my email list. So that's another way of just like getting some free tips that might be helpful in this process.
Well, you also share tips on LinkedIn too. Are you anywhere
I
else
do,
on
yes.
social? Yeah, no, I mean,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
thought they were
No,
great.
I'm on LinkedIn
Yeah.
a lot, so please feel free to
Okay.
connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn, Jenny Reynolds. And then I'm on Instagram as well with Graceful Guidance is the name of my company. And so it's Graceful Guidance Found Here. You can follow me on Instagram as
Oh,
well.
okay. That's amazing. Thanks so much for your time. I feel like I have so many more questions, but I think myself and I'm sure listeners have a lot of good tips to walk away with and things to think about.
You're welcome, Betty. Well, it's really a pleasure being here, and it was
Oh,
lovely talking with you too.
thank you.